Hey guys, I'm going to go through the process of how to make atmospheric pads that you can kind of throw into some of your tracks. I learned this technique a couple years ago and I found myself using it basically every time I do something. Sometimes it's really subtle, sometimes it's kind of in your face, but it's a good thing to know, so I figured this would be a good place to start. This is basically what it's going to sound like. It's kind of just a soft, kind of ambient, backgroundy pad. All of that is actually based on one note. It's just a sample of a grand piano. Um, that's basically all it's based on, and what we're doing is reversing it and kind of adding a whole bunch of stuff to it. So, to get started, I'm going to take my whole instrument that I just made and just delete it so we can start over from scratch. First thing you want to do is find a note, or find a sample that has kind of a sharp attack, but it's got a long trail that kind of ends it off. So any mallet type instrument will do. If you hang drums, pianos, even guitars work well. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can use for this. So basically, find your note, and we're going to add a sampler to a track and kind of start from there. So we go into the instruments panel, and we're going to throw in a sampler. And what we're going to do, I'm just going to delete this track because we don't need it. I'm going to take my sample and just drag it into this bottom area here. For some reason it's defaulting to 23 dB up, which is extremely loud, so I'm just going to select that, hit delete, and it's going to reset that to 0. Now with my track armed, which is indicated by this little red icon here, I can actually go through and play the note. I know it's a C3, so if I play C3 on my keyboard, it's gonna play that note. What I can do, so I can play it all over the place, is go into this little zone window and select the note on C3 and just drag it across everything. That's just kind of a quick way to enable you to kind of play it everywhere. It's not going to sound the greatest, but in a case of making a pad like this, it really doesn't matter too much. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to change the start and end point of this loop and reverse it. So it's pretty straightforward. There's a little reverse button down here. If we click that and then hold down our note, you can kind of see it's starting from the tail end and working its way up. So what we're going to do is going to extend it using this little indicator at the top, or using the loop start field down here. If you just click and drag, you can kind of move it around. So we're basically going to find a starting point that's relatively quiet, and it builds up to, you know, about here, about where it starts to really pick up. If you hold down the note, you can kind of see what's happening there. The only thing is that once you hit the very tail end of this, you can hear a little click. That's kind of where the sample's ending. So to get rid of that, we can just jack up this crossfade, and it's going to allow us to kind of fade in the end and the beginning to the point where we don't really hear that anymore. It's just a lot more subtle now. That's kind of the foundation of it right there. So once we have our note reversed and set with the proper start and end points like we just did here, we're basically going to add a bunch of effects to it. To start off, I usually throw in a delay, because with these kind of pads you want it to be kind of in the background, very reverby, kind of subtle. So starting with a simple delay, you can just kind of play around until you get some settings that you like. So that adds a fair bit of ambiance to it. I usually like to throw in a couple delays. There's a couple different ones you can try. There's a ping pong delay, which is a little more pronounced rather than simple delay. I'm actually going to change our start point because it's taking a little bit too long to fade in. I'm just going to click and drag this. Click and drag here as well. Yeah, that's much better. One other thing we can do is go to this filter tab and we can adjust the attack of the sample itself. I like to bring it up a little bit just so it's a little more natural sounding. Perfect. This is where it kind of comes down to experimentation, but a couple other things I've thrown on with a decent amount of success is the filter delay. You can play around with the settings, but it's a lot easier to hone in where you want the delay to actually come from. So you can change the higher frequency settings and kind of change the delay time on each one. I'm not going to get too crazy with this. I'm just going to leave the default settings on and just turn the volume down so it's a little bit more subtle. Another thing we can do is throw on the grain delay. This is kind of tricky to use at first, but if you just play around with settings, you usually find something that you like. One thing to note, if you activate the spray feature and bring it up, it adds some high frequency harmonics to the sound that kind of give it a more of a shimmery sound. Obviously this is at 100% wet, which we don't want, so if I bring that down, you can kind of hear a glitter at the very end. So we'll keep that. Another thing we want to add is a compressor. Right now it's kind of all over the place, so if we even out the sound by dropping the threshold down and bringing the output up, we get a little bit more of a stable sound that we can work with. Last but not least, reverb. This is kind of the glue for this whole thing. Again, playing around with the settings, you'll find something that you like eventually, but the most important things are to increase the decay time, so it has a long, long tail. I like to put the quality filter on high always. You can play around with the dry wet settings. And you can also throw on a utility, which is a lovely little plugin that allows you to kind of boost the gain and increase the width a little bit, so it gives it a little bit more of a stereo image. If you go too crazy, it sounds pretty bad, but I find if you just bring it a little bit above 100%, it's a nice sound. So that's basically that instrument. Once you have it all figured out, you can select all of your tracks by selecting your sampler instrument, going all the way to the right, shift-clicking on everything, and then hitting Command-G. And it's going to group it into a nice little instrument that's kind of easy to throw around. And then you can save it from here. Some examples that I've used to kind of give you a better idea of how this is used in context. I can show you the exact same thing I just did using a hang drum instead of a note from a grand piano, and I've done a little bit of automation, so it kind of fluctuates a lot during this whole process, but this will give you an idea of what it can sound like. So that's the samples it's based off of. And one other example, I actually use it for the intro to one of my songs. So it's just a really cool effect. It's a great place to start if you're new to Ableton, because it kind of gives you the opportunity to just play around with all these crazy effects. So that's it. Let me know if you have any questions.